All right, well, welcome everybody. It's the 2:15 session. This is the alternative delivery methods. My name's Jeff Garland. I'm with NCDOT, and I get the pleasure of introducing the panel up here. We've got Roger Rochelle, we've got Tim McFadden, and we've got Nathan Moneyham. Did I say that correctly? Excellent. So a few housekeeping things. We'll put up the QR code for the PDHs at the end. And I think most people will save the questions for the latter part of the presentation unless they tee you up, but Q&A towards the end. That said, we'll just kick right in and we'll go from here. But Tim, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, everybody.
I want to thank everyone for being here. My name is Tim McFadden. I'm the State Alternative Delivery Engineer in the Alternative Delivery Unit. And today we're going to talk about some of the delivery methods that we use in the Alternative Delivery Unit. And also we're going to relate them kind of to the Hurricane Helene project. I have Nathan and Roger that will assist me with talking about the O&R that we do with Design Build and also the Progressive Design Build, and we'll go into the CMGC portion of this also. As I said, some of the delivery methods that we will be covering today is the actual Design Build, Emergency Express Design Build, CMGC, and also Progressive Design Build. The first one that we'll start talking about is Design Build. First of all, I'm going to ask a simple question. Who knows nothing about Design Build? Oh, put your hand up. Just to give you a brief overview of the Design Build process, basically Design Build utilizes a two-step process that involves shortlisting prospective Design Build teams that compete in a best value procurement process. Basically, it's a best value process considered both cost and score. What we have is roughly an 8-month procurement from advertisement to award of the project. Basically, during that 8-month procurement, we will put out a RFQ for the Design Build teams to submit their statement of qualifications. With that, we have what we call a technical review committee that will review those statement of qualifications. That technical review committee consists of 5 members. Mostly it will be someone from the division, which is like the division construction engineer. It will also be someone from the construction unit, from the chief's office, or the construction unit as far as their assistant or the construction engineer. And then we will have 3 other members from subject matter units such as roadway, structures, maybe work zone. It depends on the complexity and the size of the project. We normally will select those TRC members from there. The TRC, as I said, once they get those statement of qualifications in, they will evaluate those, and then we will shortlist up to anywhere from 2 to 5 teams. Normally, what we feel is the sweet spot, and the industry also said is that basically shortlist 3 teams. That would give pretty much a good advantage for those 3 teams to go after the procurement. During that procurement process, we will, once we shortlist, we will give them the request for proposal, which is the RFP. Basically, that is the contract that they will be using to submit their technical proposal and also their price proposal on. They will get that RFQ. We have technically an industry draft that we will give them. They will review that. We will let them come in. We have Q&As with them. We let them come in. They look at it. They'll tell us if there's any discrepancies that they see in there or if there's any questions that they have related to the RFP. Basically, in those RFPs, we have scopes of work from each unit, hydro, structures, work zone, geotech, so forth, and we go through that with them. One thing that we've done recently, we talked to the industry about this. We have opened it up where they submit their questions. We let them submit as many questions as they want, non-confidential. Once we get those questions, we will review those, we try to answer them, and then we post it out on our website so that all the Design Build teams will see what those questions are. We've noticed that that has helped us as far as writing the RFP a little better, and it also gives the Design Build teams opportunity when we have these Q&As to get more involved in some of their confidential questions so that that give them a little bit more opportunity to talk about that so that we can actually get better answers and we get better results from our from our RFP. We found that that has helped us out a whole lot. Once we get through the Q&A process, we'll put out another second industry draft, have Q&As, and then we'll go forward with the final RFP. During the procurement, we have something what we call alternative technical concepts. And basically what that does is it gives the design build team the opportunity to look at the RFP. And let's just say we put in the roadway section that we would want to have a diamond interchange. They can submit an ATC that says we want to put in a diversion diamond or a spewey, and it kind of goes against what we say in the RFP. But this is our innovative way of letting the design build teams give us their innovation so that they can put that in their in their technical proposal, and it will not count against them as far as breaking the RFP. It won't be a non-responsive RFP. This also helps with, like I say, the innovation, and it also helps us with maybe cost or schedule as well. As we get through that process, we get up to what we call the technical proposal. They will submit a technical proposal along with their price proposal that is sealed, and that is not open until we open bids. Once we get to that part, we actually have each team that will come in and do a presentation of their technical proposal before the TRC, and the TRC will evaluate those technical presentations along with their technical proposal. And what we have in there, as I said, is best value and cost. We have a chart in there because we will give them a score on their technical proposal. We'll take that score and we have a chart that we will reduce the cost of their price proposal based off of the score that they get. And that is where we get that best price proposal from. I keep forgetting the name of it. It's their qualified cost. Excuse me on that one. Once we get that, it's their adjusted cost, and then we will use the lowest score from that to award the project. We've had situations where a team may come in with a lower price proposal, but because of their score, someone else may have a higher score, but when we adjust the score based off of when we adjust the price based off of their score, the other team will win. That's why we call it best price. Best price off of their score. One other thing I want to talk about as far as the design build process, we have came up with what we call the optimization and refinement for the design build process. We use that on a project up in I-26, which Nathan will talk about a little bit more. The reason that we came up with this optimization and refinement was once we started going through the procurement for the I-26 project, when we got to the price, we realized that when we got the prices in, it did not match what we had programmed for the project. And we have this thing called best and final offer that we can go through once we get to that point. But once we got to that point, we knew going through that process it would take a long time, and it was not going to give us the best value that we need for this project. What we did, we are a part of a group of 36 alternative delivery engineers throughout the United States. They have a committee that we are a part of. What we did was we reached out to them to ask the question to see if there was another way that the other states have done this, to see if we could get to a better process other than going through the BAFO process. Arkansas came up with this optimization and refinement process that they did on their project. The thing with them was they realized during the procurement that the funding was not there, so they implemented this. We had already got to the point where we had already opened bids and we were at the BAFO process. So we implemented this optimization and refinement process to help us get through to get to awarding the project. And some of the things with this optimization and refinement process is optimization and refinement, which we call O&R, provides NCDOT with the approach to allow for the evaluation of a baseline technical proposal, baseline price proposal, and an O&R proposal to select the best design build team. What we will do is we will still give them the RFP. They will still give us a baseline technical proposal along with their baseline price proposal. They will include the O&R package in that, which will offer innovative ideas of how we could reduce the cost of the project. Once we go through that process, then we will we will also evaluate the O&R along with the baseline, just like we do a normal design build project. Some of the other stuff that we talked about in this process is the O&R process allows for post-award extension of the project procurement, where NCDOT and the Best Value Design Build team will work collaboratively to optimize and refine the project as necessary. O&R provides an opportunity for refinement of the overall project scope, reduce costs while delivering required aspects of the original project scope. During the O&R process, NCDOT and the Design Build team will work collaboratively to find scope reduction and optimization that do not eliminate necessary functions of the project. NCDOT work with and compensate the Design Build team during the O&R period, creates an opportunity for both parties to mitigate risk and to create a more efficient and optimal price project. Design Build team efforts during the O&R period are provided in the O&R proposal. The O&R proposal will be submitted along with the baseline technical proposal and the baseline price proposal. The O&R period may include innovations, approaches that, if incorporated into the project, improve NCDOT likelihood of meeting its project goals. The Design Build team is paid a monthly payment, which is included with the Design Build team's baseline price proposal. At the successful conclusion of the O&R period, reductions in the project scope and the cost are documented through an O&R supplemental agreement. If NCDOT and the Design Build team cannot agree to an O&R supplemental agreement or agree to an extension of the O&R period, NCDOT may terminate the contract at its sole discretion. During this O&R period, we basically have like a 6-month O&R period so that we can work through these innovations and ideas. Some of the potential activities in the O&R period may include coordination to incorporate the incorporation of innovative concepts, coordinate risk mitigation, perform preliminary engineering to refine the project scope and costs, coordinate utility relocations, coordinate with third party, which is railroad or utilities, etc., identify additional right-of-way impacts and or savings, and establish baseline schedules. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nathan to talk a little bit about how we implemented the O&R on the I-25 13B&D project.
Thanks, Tim. As Tim said, I'm Nathan Monaghan, the DCE in Division 13. This is, I guess, the testimonial portion of the presentation. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but try and give you some context of how we used it and why we came up with it. A lot of folks in the room have probably worked on 2513. Most have. It's been going on for 35 years, so most everybody has touched it in some way or another. But as Tim mentioned, has already covered a lot of these principles of how we were applying the O&R process to our project. We looked at a lot of high-risk elements. We looked at our scope in a way to combine ideas from other teams. How do I move forward, Tim? The bottom button. Okay. So just from a time frame perspective, and Tim kind of mentioned on how we came up with this, but 2513's been coming for a long time, and we really felt like we'd hit a major milestone when we got to even procurement. And then we spent 13 months going through procurement with our 3 teams. And we got to our initial bid opening. and we were well over our program funding, to the point that we were kind of very much in crisis mode to a certain extent. And really that comes to the fact that when we got into the BAFO process, the delta that we were talking about between our available funding in the STIP and the bids that we had received in the initial bid opening were not small. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. And we've just spent 13 months going through a procurement process. Our 3 shortlisted teams were not all that excited about extending that another 6 to 8 months to try and make those sort of changes. So that's really what led us to O&R. We were looking for a way that we could move that process of reducing scope, reducing risk, into a post-award scenario. And that's really what O&R is. We added that, and Tim's covered a bunch of it already about the process of O&R and how we compensated the contractor, and we asked for submittals in the BAFO RFP for them to give us an idea how they would approach that O&R period, that 6-month period, and then also the costs associated with it. So we got to our BAFO bid opening, and we opened bids, and the bids were basically the same as they were in our original bid opening, with the inclusion of the O&R payments. And with that, as Tim covered, and all the standard design build ways and the technical scores being evaluated, the best value award went to Archer Wright Joint Venture, and we executed a contract. And we really began the O&R process for this project in June of last year. So what did we do in 6 months? Well, we really worked directly with Archer Wright, our contractor, and RK&K designer, to find scope reductions. We didn't necessarily just look for scope reductions. We looked for construction efficiencies, for different innovations. We really looked everywhere. We started with a 2 or 3 day kind of charrette, throwing all ideas at the table, working through those. And we came up with probably, I think in those first couple of days, roughly about 200 plus things that we were going to evaluate in 6 months. And we had some guardrails in that. Again, it was a major milestone to get the FES and the ROC signed and done for this project. It took such a long time. We wanted to make sure we didn't run afoul of any of those commitments. We had a lot of history in the aesthetic elements of the project that we want to maintain. Separation of I-26 and Patton Avenue traffic, which is a major goal of the project. And then there were a whole lot of pedestrian and cyclist connections that we wanted to maintain as well. So in that 6 months, we're working through those things that we came up with. There was a significant amount of stakeholder coordination required. We were compensating the team, but also we were also pulling the city of Asheville and the MPO and the county and lots of other folks to the table to get their input. And that was, I would say, another big benefit to O&R versus the kind of scope changes and changes you can make during procurement, is because it takes it away from the confidentiality. You can talk pretty openly and find out opinions of those stakeholders about the changes we make. And ultimately, Tim's covered a lot of this, that we can just continue to work through those ideas and work towards solutions. So we continue with our stakeholder coordination. We continued to work with the city of Asheville to optimize those concepts that we come up with. And ultimately, now that we've completed it, we plan to go to the public with those. So again, this is broad and I'm covering a lot, but for the sake of time, really the results of O&R are that we, with working through this process in 6 months with a contractor on board, with stakeholders at the table, with our designers there from the design build team and our own technical units, we were able to be successful with the O&R process. Overall, the savings are approximately $125 million. That supplemental agreement has been executed. For those in the room that mess with high cams, we had to modify high cams to allow for a negative supplemental agreement that big. And the bridge, the scope reductions, really, there's about $63 million in bridge reductions. that we removed. There's about $26 million in miscellaneous structures. Those are walls and different things. About $24 million in paving. About $7 million in earthwork. And those are just some big targets. But really, when you think about O&R and the things we did, what we really did was challenge the assumptions that have been made about this project from years past. We said yes to some things that stakeholders had asked for years prior that we had said no to. We just really reevaluated what is really necessary. What is the things that are critical to the purpose of either project, and what is a preference versus a requirement, whether that be things like shoulder widths, material types, things that are long-term maintenance costs that we like to see in projects, but ultimately in this case we couldn't afford. So we pulled them out. And it really, lots of things started to add up to get to this $125 million number. A lot of risk mitigation in that as well. We did some things pulling lump sum items out and pricing them as unit prices. We waived the warranty for the project. We removed a lot of things that are generally we're tied to, but again, in that process allowed us to have open discussions about what are we really getting for, how much are we really paying for this, and then evaluate and make decisions based off that in the way that you can in a pre-award during procurement type process. But ultimately with that, with the savings, we were able to move forward with the project. It's on its original schedule. I think for those that are familiar with the funding originally in the STIP, we were funded for about $850 million. Our initial award, as I showed in the other slide, pre-O&R was about $1.147 billion. We're down to $1.023 billion now. So it's a combination of the funding going up and the project coming down. But the sub-mill agreement is executed, and we are moving forward with the project, which is really something that I think there were many times personally that during that 6 months and a couple months prior that I wasn't very hopeful that was going to happen. But we were able to work through that process again by really evaluating the whole project from start to finish. And looking at every aspect of it and determining what was a must-have versus a want, and getting our stakeholders to buy in to the changes that we made. You want me to do that too?
One other thing that I will also reiterate during this is when we first came up with this process, we had to go to Federal Highway and talk to our Federal Highway partners to make sure that we could use this under the design build process. Arkansas, they were able to talk to their Federal Highway partners, and they said that this fit up under the design build process. So we had coordinations with Federal Highway, and they looked at it and said that this model would fit under our design build process. So we had to write a white paper to get them to look at it, review it, and they gave us the green light to use this process. We will not be using this process on all of our design build projects. We basically use this when we have a situation where we know that what the award price is not going to meet what our funded price is. We've had conversations with our industry partners. They had asked if we were going to put this in our regular design build projects, and at this time we don't think we will be using it for that. But it is a tool in the toolbox that if we have a situation like this in the future, we have something that will get us to that finishing line so that we can move forward on that. Next, we'll talk about the express design build delivery method. Well, before I get into that, as far as design build projects, we have a selection process that we are working out with PMU and also with our other partners within design build. Originally, most of our design build projects are the ones that we consider the complicated projects. Some of them that we've done in the past are the Asheboro bypass, the I-485, I-85 interchange in Charlotte. Some of those projects also in Charlotte were design build. One of our recent projects in this area was the I-40 project from the I-40 Beltline into Johnson County to NC-42. Most of the time, design build is selected because it gives you the opportunity to have the design build team start working on the project. We will give them roughly the 25-30% plans. They start looking at those plans and they start working on those as we go through the procurement. Design build is to help speed up the schedule, and also with the innovations, we're hoping that we can reduce the cost of the project. With this project, some of the risks that were told to us when we got that bid in was a lot of the utilities and third-party risk. One contractor basically told us that when they took their bid to their lawyers, they said you're going to put all the risk in your price. And that came out to be roughly about $70 million. So with the O&R process, that helped us mitigate some of those risks and get this project to the finish line. Next, we'll talk about the Emergency Express design build. Basically, with the Emergency Express design build, as what we have with Hurricane Helene, we have a process where we can select design build teams to help us get out there and replace some of these bridges based off of natural disasters. Basically, teams that are interested in the process service necessary for, I should have my glasses on and I don't, so I apologize. Teams interested in providing services necessary for the emergency replacement or rehabilitation of bridges, culverts, or pipes 48 inches or larger submit an SOQ in response to the RFQ. Each divisions that are interested in working. NCDOT utilize a one-step process to shortlist 3 to 5 teams per division. Teams can be shortlisted in multiple divisions and will be utilized for 2 years with an option to extend 1 year under this contract. During an emergency express bridge replacement, ADU works with the division to get an RFP out as quickly as possible. Divisions can choose a team from the list, or they could do a competitive low bid let. With what we have with the Hurricane Helene, as I said, basically here, we do have a list of shortlisted teams for each division for emergency replacement. But with the size and the number of bridges that were washed out and need to be replaced, the department, along with the chief's office, we made a decision that we would go back out and solicit more design build teams to help us with the recovery effort. So we put out another RFQ asking for more design build teams to help us with this recovery effort. Once we got that, we also put out a survey to all the teams. Once we shortlisted the teams that we wanted to help us with this process, we sent out a survey asking them to prioritize which division that they would like to do work in. And we were doing this for divisions 11, 13, and 14. Once we got that list, what we started doing is we started the procurement process back in December. We have, like Nathan said in the earlier session, we had like 17 groups for Division 14. We also have 4 groups for Division 14 and 4 groups for Division 11. Nathan and Division 14 has asked us to actually do the procurement through Central. Division 14 asked us to help them with 2 of their groups, and Division 11 decided they would ask for assistance from us, but they would go ahead and procure the RFPs and do the award for themselves. So we helped them through the Q&A and helped them write their RFPs, and we went through that process with them. As I said, we had different groups for the express design build packages. With Division 11, they had 3 groups, 5 bridges and 2 culverts. So far, they have awarded $14.4 million with those groups. With Division 14, we had 4 groups with 10 bridges. Those awards came out to be about $20.4 million. And with Division 13, what I have here is 13 groups that we've already awarded, roughly 33 bridges at $67.5 million. As of 2 o'clock today, we did hopefully award the last 3 to 4 groups in Division 14. I mean, in Division 13. Yeah, knock on wood. Hopefully we got there. Don't know if we may be getting some more bridges from Division 13, because I know they got a lot that we need to help them with. So there may be the possibility of some more of these Express Design Build projects coming out. Is there anything you want to add on that, Nathan?
Yeah, I would just say, from 13's perspective specifically, I think we relied heavily on Tim and his group to help us through this process just because the volume was above and beyond what we could handle, as far as pulling contracts together and getting those let. The other thing that I would say, and this is probably consistent across 11 of ours, we were trying to get these out at a speed that was a lot quicker than what we would normally do even in Express. The level of information that we had was definitely less than what a lot of folks are used to. So the Q&As were very important. We got a lot of interesting questions, conversations that were generated out of those, because we're really in a scenario where not just necessarily from a geotech standpoint, although we were working with geotech to get scoring, surveys, all the things that we could do, we were trying to do. But when you're right out there, the entire landscape of most of these areas. So existing condition is something other than that had been there historically. You couldn't go back and look at old plans. River was not even prior to. I think from an industry standpoint, I think the accomplishments that we've had to get as many of these as we have under contract with some pretty good bids, we feel like too. Thanks for the collaboration and going through that effort, because it definitely was a lot to get through that. And we specifically 13 was pretty heavy.
And also, these are also under the reimbursement. So we're looking at also including some resiliency, but we also want to make sure that we are replacing so that we can get reimbursed. These bridges are anything from, I think we have some timber bridges, core slabs, and we do have some that are on US and primary routes. So it's basically all across the board as far as what we're replacing, doing with these emergency express design build packages. Well, right here I'm going to kind of take a station break just to ask, is there any questions as far as what we've talked about so far as O&R or any of the express design build packages? I will open it up to some questions. Go ahead. Just for correct. Yeah. Right. For just the O&R, just regular. For design build, it depends. Once we get with division and figure out that they want the project to go design build, we'll look at what the schedule is in the STIP. And then once we see what the award date is from there, that's when we'll set our schedule as far as starting the advertisement. If it's a more complicated project, we may do more than 8 months, but normally the process is roughly about 8 months. But it's based off of what we have in the STIP as far as what the award date is, and then we just kind of backtrack out of that. Right. And I'm having a hard time hearing because of the I just want to make sure I understand what you were saying there at the end. Okay. Right, and after, yes, that could be another 6 months. Well, keep in mind, like I said, with the O&R, we're not looking at using it on our normal design build. It's just if we get to a situation where we see that it may be a program shortfall, that's when we will use the O&R period. Normally, we will not be using it for our normal design build process. It's just if we see that there's a short fund in the funding, then that's when we're going to start using the O&R. I'm sorry, say that one more time. Like I said, I'm capabilities. Yes, yes, we take all that in consideration when the TRC is evaluating these firms, design build teams, the contractor and the firm. We're looking at their capabilities, how deep the bench is, do they have enough people to actually do this? We're also looking at their workload as far as what they got going on, and will they be able to handle this project as we get through our procurement process. So yes, we're evaluating all of these parameters to make sure that who we select as far as shortlisting and also who we select as far as the team to award this project to, that they have the capabilities of meeting everything that we want. We try to spread, as we love to say, we try to spread the peanut butter around. We do know that some contractors that we've worked with in certain divisions, they may get shortlisted on a lot of their projects, but they have a relationship with those divisions. Any other questions? If not, we'll keep moving. Next, we'll talk about the CMGC process. Basically, with the CMG process, this is where we, as the owner, we will hire a designer, which is a firm, and a contractor separately. We'll have separate contracts for them to look at a project. This is a process that works very well with us because it gives us the opportunity to have the contractor come in, look at those plans as the designer is going through it, and he can give his innovative ideas as far as innovation, schedule. There's a possibility that we might be able to do some early work packages also. So not to get ahead of myself, designers and the CMGC each select separately based on qualifications and contracted separately with NCDOT, which is the owner. Construction begins after determining and agreed to what we call CAP, which is the construction agreed price. We also have a ICE that is a part of this process to help us as we start doing what we call opinion of probable construction costs or coming to the construction agreed price. Once we start getting these estimates, because the CMGC will have an estimate, our contracts administration, they will have their estimate, and then the ICE will come up with an estimate. And as we've been talking in these sessions, we will come to an agreement as far as what that construction agreed price is. As far as the procurement, pre-qualification selection is advertised through a request for letters of interest, which is an RFLOI. We will select anywhere from 2 to 5 firms to be shortlisted based on those responses to the RFLOI, which is known as letter of interest. The shortlist proposals are eligible to respond to the CMGC request for qualifications via statements of qualifications, which is the SOQ. As we heard in Alligator River, we will also let them come in and we can ask them questions and they can ask us questions based off of what we have in that RFQ. We also have a TRC that is going to be making the selection for this CMGC. And once they get in, they will evaluate each team based off of their LOI. And if they have any questions based off of that LOI, they can bring the design build team, the CMGC, in to have interviews and talk to them before they make a selection as far as who they want to select for the CMGC. Qualified CMGC proposals are ranked based on their statement of qualifications, response to the RFQ, and the optional team interview that are at the discretion of the department. CMGC also have a fixed market percentage proposed by the proposer and is open after we make the selection. The fixed markup is basically where the CMGC will provide their fixed markup as far as what they will put on the overhead as we go through the process of doing the OAPP and CAP, and also as far as work packages that we will be coming up with. We will not, once we make a selection, then we will read the fixed markup. The department has the right to either accept what they see in that fixed markup, or we can negotiate with the CMGC on that fixed markup if we feel that is too high. If we don't come to an agreement with the number one selected CMGC, we rank them. If we don't come to an agreement with them, we can move to the next person on the CMGC list. As far as the pre-construction phase of the CMGC, the construction manager section of it, proposers enter into a professional service contract for pre-construction activities. Activities may include, but are not limited to, design development, design review, risk identification, innovation management, regulatory reviews, cost estimates, qualified verifications, feasibility studies, cost control, and constructability reviews. A process that also is involved with CMGC is a risk register. This is where the CMGC will come in and they will identify risk, and we will collaborate with them in sharing that risk. And hopefully by us doing that, that will reduce the cost, and sometimes hopefully it'll reduce the schedule of the project. I think that is a very innovative idea that CMGC provides that's a little different from our design build process. Also, once we get into the construction side of it, the general contractor side of it, contractor department and the independent cost estimator, the ICE, conduct a price construction workshop. If the department and the contractor reach agreement on the price and the contract is executed to begin construction, if no agreement is come to, then the department can take an off-ramp. As I said earlier, we have opinion of probable construction costs, and then at the end we have what we call the cap. As we go through that, we do have workshops where we try to come together on the cost. If we cannot come together on a cost for this project, we have what we consider as an off-ramp. And basically, if we take the off-ramp, we will end the agreement with the CMGC, but we still have the designer that's on board that can continue to do the design. And he will go ahead and do design, and then we will go through the bid build process of awarding the project. With that, the CMGC will not be able to bid on that because he has been working with us through that process. So he's not eligible to bid on the project if we go bid build, because he's had some insider information on that project. This is also an open book process where as we go through the estimates, the contractor, he will let us know what his indirect costs, his overhead and everything. We are working together to get through that and consider. We're trying to come to an agreement on the price. So with that, it's a process that is very open, and we feel that it has great opportunity for us to actually get where we need to get as far as getting through these projects. Why should we choose CMGC? Basically, one of them is early collaboration. It allows for early collaboration between the project owners, designer, and the contractor during the early stages, and it leads to better design decisions and cost-saving measures. Innovative solutions. Contractors' input in the design phase can lead to innovative solutions, improving project efficiency and performance. As I mentioned before, risk management. Contractors are involved in the risk identification and mitigation, resulting in more comprehensive and risk management approach. Cost control. Contractors provide input on construction costs during the design phase, helping to manage and control the project budget. Accelerate the schedule. Early contractor involvement can help expedite project timelines by addressing constructability issues up front. We have the value engineering aspect. Contractors can suggest value engineering options that maintain project quality while reducing costs. And I won't go through each and every one of these, but basically this is to help us reduce the cost and to reduce the schedule. Also, one of the processes as we go through this with the contractor, talking to the designer, it also allows us to identify any risk. One of them may be utility relocation. If we identify that that could be a risk down the road, what we can do is what we consider early work packages, where we can go ahead and start working on getting those utilities relocated. And with those early work packages, we will work up a contract through our contracts unit, just like a normal bid bill. We'll do that contract, and we will also put a price on it, and we'll come to that reconciliation on the cost estimate for those early work packages. And this is just a timeline between design bid bill, traditional design bill, and CMGC, just to show how it can reduce the schedule and help us get this project out on the streets a little earlier in the process. With CMGC, we do have the legislation that was passed several years ago, and then we had recent legislation last year where the initial legislation we only had 5 slots for CMGC. Well, we used those up pretty fast. The recent legislation from last year gave us an additional 5 slots for CMGC. We've used 2 of those slots on the Hurricane Helene projects, and we do have those other 3 available slots. The initial legislation, we had a cap of only $500 million on those initial projects. With the last legislation, that went up to 750. The good thing with the Hurricane Helene efforts, let me backtrack on that. Hurricane Helene does not take away from our CMGC pilot projects. Legislatures passed legislation during Helene that basically opened up any delivery method that we had and didn't put a cap on the amount of money that you could use for those delivery methods. So we use CMGC on 2 of our Hurricane Helene projects. One of them is the I-40 repairs for the Pigeon River repairs. The contractor that was awarded on this was Ames Construction. The design firm is Arcane K, with the ICE being HNTB. We did award our first early works package to get the causeway done and to start doing some of the slope rehabilitations and everything on that project. I would just ask a question. Is there anyone in here from Arcane K that worked on that project? Or HNTB? I'm going to eliminate them from the project because they're not in here to hear my presentation. I will work on that. But so far, that collaboration has been going very well. Ames have been very good to work with. Arcane K, as far as designer, they have been great to work with on this project. Everything is working seamlessly, and we can't ask for anything better to get this project open as quick as possible. Because like Nathan said in the other session, we are under a very tight timeline to try to get these projects back up so that we can get people moving again. And we need quality contractors and quality firms to help us out with this. And we appreciate everyone that has put in on these projects. If you have some of the express design bills, we are greatly appreciative to y'all helping us in these recovery efforts. The other project that we have is the US 74A Girton project in Chimney Rock. Both of these projects are in Division 14. The contract on that project is Wright Brothers Construction. The design firm is HDR, with the ICE being HNTB. We're in the process of working through our first early works package. That package is kind of a temporary package that we're doing at this time, and then we'll start getting into the permanent repairs once they get that early works package done. And that package is basically doing some temporary shoring so that we can get out there and start the work. Is there any questions on the CMGC process? Independent cost estimating. One thing I will say, when we first had the hurricane to come through and some of these projects came our way, and I'm kind of segued into the progressive design build part of it. As I said, we work with our partners with FHWA. We went to them and we talked to them about the projects that we had, because we didn't see these fitting the design build, traditional design build delivery method, because there was such amount of work that needed to be done. We didn't have scopes. There was no scope because this just basically wiped out so much. There was not much information, not much surveys. There are no plans because what was there is gone. So we worked with Federal Highway through these processes to have them to say that we can use these delivery methods. One thing that happened with us as we get ready to get into progressive design build, that last legislation last year, we just got the legislation passed to do progressive design build as an alternative delivery method. With that being said, we needed to set up guidelines for Federal Highway to review before we could implement this. Well, when Hurricane Helene hit, we didn't have time for no guidelines. When we initially talked to them about these projects, and we had mentioned progressive design build, they were like, no, you do not have any guidelines. So we thought we only had the CMGC delivery process that we could use. And that's what we did with these two projects right here, because those were the first two right off the bat that we had to start procuring. So we used that on that. I think the determining factor, and I'll use Nathan on this one, because when this first happened, you know, we were seeing the pictures of all the devastation up there, especially in Chimney Rock. But Nathan called us and said, pictures does not do this justice. You have to come out here and see this. So he also got Federal Highway to go out there and see what was out there. Once Federal Highway got out there and saw the destruction in Chimney Rock, they changed their tune. They were more receptive to help us get through the process of getting guidelines set up so that we can do this for the emergency response. Also, I want to thank Roger for helping us out with getting those guidelines done, because it was very instrumental to get progressive design build up and running so that we could use this for this purpose right here. Because with progressive, it's basically a blank canvas. You're starting from scratch. You try to get contractor or progressive design build team early on in the process so that you can work through some of these items. So I want to thank Federal Highway for working with us to get to this process where we could use progressive design build. And with that, I'll turn it over to Roger Rochelle to talk a little bit about progressive design build. Yes. The maximum cost at this time is, for our normal pilot projects, is $750 million. That's the cap that we have for those pilot projects. But like I said, with the emergency relief, the legislation took the cap off so that we could use any delivery method so that we can get these projects under procurement and get them under contract. This one.
Good afternoon. My name is Roger. I'm with Hardesty in Hanover, And I got to tell you, H&H and I are very proud to be working for the DOT, Tim's group, Division 13, and others to address this horrific catastrophe. I'll tell you, when I was fortunate enough to go out and look at the site, because pictures do not do it justice, you looked around and you saw signs of hope in the form of a pallet full of stacks of water bottles, but you also saw the despair with numerous tents everywhere, houses destroyed, trucks wrapped around interior bents of bridges, and it made you want to get home that night and start writing a contract. And I'll tell you what, just getting out there and seeing it was just something else. Can I advance this way? Look at that. So I have two goals. Number one, give you a taste of progressive design build if you have never heard of it. And number two, to get you all out of here a little bit early. Progressive design build is just that. It's a phased approach to design build. It's really the most inherent way to get early collaboration on a project. There is no NEPA. There is no start of study. There is just a contractor, their team of designers, and the DOT hashing it out, determining what the scope is, writing that scope down, mitigating risk, and then pricing it, negotiating that price. Tim already talked about the legislation. I won't talk about that. But I will say that progressive design build moves very, very quickly. For instance, working with Federal Highway, they've really been a cheerleader in this process, been very supportive. The federal regs on design build are outdated and don't address progressive design build. So some of the CMGC regs had to be applied to what we were doing here. And it was really a puzzle to get through. But Federal Highway was great throughout the process. So just talk very briefly. There are, as Federal Highway would state, there are currently 7 projects in the country using progressive design build that are supported by federal aid dollars. You will hear of other progressive design builds around the country, but they're state funded. So only 7 in the country. North Carolina DOT has 5 of them, and here they are. Graphically, they are all centered around Burnsville with the exception of Chimney Rock. Jim? Yeah, thank you. I don't know what it is. To give you an idea of scale, Chimney Rock obviously is not pictured here. But you can see the 4 other projects and give you an idea of scale. That picture is about 30 miles wide and about 25 miles tall. We're talking 70 or 80 miles worth of roadway, dozens of bridges that are affected by Hurricane Helene and are covered by these progressive design build projects. So with progressive design build, typical design build request for proposals does not work. So even the request for qualifications, the first stage, is an abbreviated request for qualifications. The teams form, they put together a statement of qualifications. The first one that was submitted was only limited to 12 pages. I think we went to 15 pages on the last 4. But we're talking about from the time you advertise, Tim advertises, to the time they select can be as little as 4 to 5 to 6 weeks. And now all of a sudden you've got a contractor and their design firms selected to do a $300, $400 million project. So it moves very, very quickly. But that means you have to look at the contracts a little bit differently. So what we've done is we have a pre-construction agreement that basically gets the team under contract and gets them started. Started with developing a rough order of magnitude estimate for the project, start with some very preliminary schedules, starting to identify risks and mitigation thereof, starting to identify areas for value engineering, and actually writing the scope of work with the department for the work that's going to need to occur for that particular project. That's a pre-construction agreement. It looks a lot like a professional services agreement, except it's signed with the contractor. You could have additional pre-construction agreements as you get further. You may have a work package that we want to do a lump sum design cost. We would negotiate a pre-construction agreement for that. Then there's this overarching master agreement, what I refer to it as, and that's all the typical information that's in a design build RFP that will apply to all the works going forward. All that's in one master agreement so that it doesn't have to be repeated in all the other future contracts. The first construction contract, there's $0 associated with the master agreement, by the way. It's just an overarching document. Then the first construction package is an early work package. This is us determining what scope of work can be pulled out so that the contractor can get started. It may be a critical piece or segment of the project, or it may be just one that's easy to pull out and price quickly. For instance, you could pull out 2 or 3 bridges and price those relatively quickly like you would an express design build. And you would write down the scope of work, you'd assign the risks, mitigate those as much as you can, and on an open book basis, and again with an independent cost estimator, figure out what that agreed upon price is for that early work package. We would envision there being several early work packages per project. And then in the federal regs terminology, the last contract that encapsulates all the rest of the design and all the rest of the construction is called the construction contract. So why choose Progressive? This looks familiar. It's a lot like CMGC. Unlike CMGC, there's one contract. The DOT has one contract with the design build team instead of separate contracts with the contractor and a separate contract with the designer. And so that collaboration begins on day one. Literally before these teams are under contract, we're meeting, kicking off the projects, brainstorming about what the scope of work should be and what we should tackle first. A lot lower procurement risk. Tim's folks do not have to spend 6 to 8 months putting together a design build RFP and reacting to the hundreds of questions that come in on the content of that RFP. Instead, you're talking face to face and you're determining what that RFP should look like together. And because there is no bid, there's very little risk to the contracting industry as well. Risk allocation, you're openly talking about the risks and who should bear those risks and how those risks should be assigned and mitigated. And again, I mentioned the simplified contractual relationship with Progressive Design Build as compared to CMGC in particular. Last, I'll leave you with one slide that this is just a schematic that I came up with to describe the different contractual relationships of the alternative delivery methods that we talked about today. We'll start on the right with design build and express design build. Typically, almost always, this is a contract that's awarded post-NEPA. It can be either best value or low bid if you're in an express design build. But it's always tied to a dollar amount. It's a lump sum bid regardless, right? It's either best value lump sum or low bid lump sum. You'd have the DOT that has their contract with the design build team. You may or may not have a GEC or a GESC on board to assist the division or to assist ADU. If you slide over to the left towards Progressive, you're adding one bubble there, and that is your independent cost estimator. So again, Ron Davenport's folks in contracts will do their bid estimate, but those are basically historically based on, historical bid tabs, right? The independent cost estimate comes in and looks at labor rates. They look at burdens. They look at, performance rates and laydown rates and all these different things to come up with a different way to price the job, more like a contractor will on a project-specific basis. So you have that third contract, and again, a GESC is optional. I think on the progressive design builds, they're engaging a couple of different firms to help them do a couple different things. When you get to CMGC, that is also pre or post NEPA. It's typically a quality-based selection, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And like progressive design build, it's negotiated construction dollars. But unlike progressive design build, GESC also adds that second contract. So you've got a separate contract with the designer and another contractor with the construction manager, general contractor. 10 minutes. So That's all I have. What questions do you have? I suppose we'll open it up for any topics. Yes. If I understood, how are they compensated, the design firms compensated on CMGC and Progressive Design Build? On CMGC, it's typical design contract, so it could be an initial cost plus, but typically you'd get a lump sum negotiated price for the design of the contract, like you would if it were a bid build job. On Progressive Design Build, we've stipulated it's going to be cost plus for that initial contract. And that initial contract, the initial pre-construction agreement, we would hope would last no more than 3 to 6 to 8 months while we're negotiating early work package. During that pre-construction agreement, we specify a healthy design fee, 15%, in a cost-plus arrangement. So that's how they're compensated during the pre-construction agreement. We get to an early work package, it becomes more of a lump sum, and that's internalized to the contractor's bid. Yes. Right now, I think the CMGC would progress much like a Progressive Design Build in that area, in that there'd be an early work package, and they would have 100% payment of performance bonds for that early work package. Then you add to it, and you either replace that bond with a larger bond or add to it by rider. Any other questions?
And I'm going to put the QR code up on the screen for a minute. I've also got an evaluation for the whole conference up here on the front table as well. But then that'll be it. But I'll get this code up here in just a second. Let's see if I can find this code real quick. Escape. Yep, alternative, there it is. And there's the magic one, yep. Read it from there. So again, one is for PDH for this one, and one is an evaluation for the whole conference, I believe, the end of day, which is good, yep.